Hi, everyone. I hope you guys are enjoying the summit. So I'll be your speaker today, and as you can see, the title is Igniting the Transformation with Courageous Leadership. I'm Charlene Cuenca. I'm a Principal Consultant, SAFE Fellow, SPCT from Icon Agility Services, and I've got lots of information to share with you, so I'm glad that you guys joined for today's talk. So when you think about the title of my talk, Igniting the Transformation with Courageous Leadership, I chose those words intentionally. So let's take a closer look. When we talk about igniting something, it means to excite feelings and passions, to spark off, to trigger. What do we mean by courageous? This is having the mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. And of course, the center point of this talk is all about leadership. And leadership is not necessarily a person, right? It's a process of social influence, which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. When we think about leadership's role as we continue a journey towards business agility and trying to achieve that for our organization, we always want to start with forming our guiding coalition. This is where our leadership can be heavily engaged, and in SAFE we call this a LACE, right? And you can see here 8 steps to successful organizational change management from John Kotter. And in his words, a guiding coalition that operates as an effective team can process more information more quickly. It can also speed the implementation of new approaches because powerful people are truly informed and committed to those key decisions. Now, when we think about this guiding coalition, we call that a LACE, it's going to continue to evolve depending on how the transformation is going and as we start to scale that out. The LACE's charter is really meant to make sure that we have an organization that can support the wider organization as far as lean agile values and principles and the practices that go with it. They're also there to help tackle larger organizational challenges. So they have a very important remit to help lead the transformation. And as you can see here, a LACE is going to evolve over time, right? The journey is going to take different shapes as we continue to scale this. And in the beginning, we may start off with a small group of people that are fully dedicated. And usually when we're new, early on in our transformation, we're focused on launching arts and getting them going and learning rapidly. But as we start to scale this out, we want to make sure that we have a true dedicated team where that's their full-time job and their full-time goal to get value and benefit out of lean agile ways of working as we continue to transform ourselves and start to really achieve business agility. Then we'll scale this across the organization. The LACE may take a different shape. But remember, transformation doesn't start and end. This is an ongoing journey. And this guiding coalition with your leadership is meant to be long-lived, right? To continue to make sure we're getting value. And we should set up a guiding coalition or LACE so that it has decision-making authority. This group is meant to take ownership, and they're accountable and responsible for getting results for the organization. And when we think about the role of the LACE, the role of this guiding coalition, we're not just focused on having better delivery, right? We want to evolve beyond delivery agility. We want to get true business agility from strategy to execution and really start to build this way of working into the organization's DNA. Leadership is absolutely crucial to achieving this value. So more on the LACE. We know from the implementation roadmap, before we even identify our value streams, before we even launch our first arts, we want to train our leadership. We've gotten past the tipping point. We know this is important. We see value in it. And you can see very on in the roadmap, we train our executives, we train our leaders, we identify those change agents. They're going to be part of our guiding coalition as a crucial first step. And this group has 5 main responsibilities. Of course, they're going to be facilitating the transformation. That's definitely one of the main things that they do. But a good LACE is going to eat their own dog food, drink their own champagne. They're going to be an agile team too. And they work from a transformation backlog, right? A prioritized backlog of the different change we want to bring to the organization. And as part of any transformation effort, we need to make sure folks are getting trained on this new way of working, so facilitating and building out a learning organization and conducting those trainings, as well as coaching leadership. I'm going to show you some LACE patterns and models I've used with different organizations. We want leadership as part of that LACE, But there are other leaders in the ecosystem that we're going to need to coach. We're going to need to help them make that transition and shift their mindset to support this. And then, of course, true business agility means we are nimble as an organization and we can connect strategy to execution by implementing lean portfolio management. So frequently, the people that are part of this guiding coalition are going to be coaching those practices around LPM to really help us make sure we've got a good strategic lens. Now, what are some common patterns that we use in terms of how should we set up our LACE? What would that look like in my company? We have these 3 patterns that you've probably seen before. The first one is having a centralized LACE. This is one single entity, fully dedicated, that's going to be driving and leading change. It could be for one portfolio, or it could be for the entire enterprise, depending on what you choose. The second model is a decentralized LACE, right? We've got, maybe in a large enterprise, we've got multiple portfolios or business areas going. They can each use a different implementation or configuration of SAFE, and they could each decide how they want to implement their LACE within their portfolio. So you've got that decentralized model as the second option, and then the third one is a hub and spoke, right? We've still got those kind of decentralized decision-making happening in those local portfolios, and they'll have their own LACE. But we have a thin enterprise kind of hub here in the middle that serves as the glue and starts to unite all of the different LACEs and make sure that we're learning from one another. And it also serves as a way to, in a lot of organizations, we want standardization across our different implementations of SAFE. So we can kind of drive that through that central hub that we have. Now, some notes here before we start getting into some of the tactical examples. Remember that LACEs can and will evolve over time, right? Where you start with your transformation may look different 5 years later when you've started to spread that across the organization. So they will evolve. And as you're going to see in my examples, leadership is integral to a good LACE model. The third point here, a coach's only LACE model won't work, right? I actually walked into an organization once where, this is one of the first things I ask when I'm trying to get a current state assessment to try to understand where they're at. And I asked the leader that I was working with, do you have a transformation team today? Do you have like a LACE? And she pointed me to this group of people, and I went and talked with their leader. But what I noticed was they didn't have, it was just coaches only. That's all they had as part of their LACE. And the leader that they reported to wasn't really high enough in the organization where people took them seriously. So they were kind of viewed, when I talked with other people, they were viewed as the process police. So that's definitely not an effective LACE, right? So yes, we want coaches on our LACE, of course, but it can't just be a coaches only LACE. As you're going to see in my examples, a good LACE has depth and breadth of leadership, right? So we're going to take a look at some examples. Now I'm going to talk about this kind of general pattern I've used at multiple companies. And as we think through this, remember, this is still a virtual network, right? It's a virtual organization. And my model has kind of 3 components to it. One of them is your core LACE team. This is your dedicated people that are going to be, that's going to be their full-time job. They wear no other hats, right? They're dedicated to transformation work. That's how they're incentivized. And they're operating as an agile team. So they have a leader that might serve as the product owner. They also work with an executive LACE, which is like the business owners or sponsors of the transformation. But like I said before, this is a dedicated agile team. And their remit is to drive and make sure that we're getting value from moving towards business agility and lean agile ways of working. So this is full-time dedicated. Now, the other component is when we think about breadth and depth of leadership, we want to make sure that we're engaging other functional groups in the organization, right? We don't want to just drive this through IT and engineering or just through product. We know when we look at our value streams that value flows across the silos. And we want people from different parts of the organization to take part in our LACE, but those guys already have a full-time job, right? We can't just pluck them out of their function and put them on the LACE, but we want to make sure we have partnership with these functions. So we may have an extended LACE. They're part-time people. They stay connected to the LACE. They understand what we're doing, and also they can help roll out changes, right, within their function. And the other key piece to this is we're all working together. So it's not like, the LACE is driving everything. We want our other counterparts involved to help to help do this together more cohesively. This executive lace is the third component of this. So we want to engage our C-suite. We want to make sure that, we keep them on the forefront of what's happening in our transformation, because after all, they're paying for it. And we also want to be able to leverage their positional authority, because we may run into some organizational blockers where we have no control over that. But by having an executive lace, you actually have the ability to bring them along. Like when we get our wins, it's their win too. And if we get blocked somewhere by something in the organization, we can leverage their position to help unblock those things. And of course, in a typical lace, we have these typical focus areas, right? We've got coaching, training, agile tooling, a knowledge center, communications, and also metrics. And we can call this whatever we want. In SAFE, we call it a lace, but the most important thing is that they're cross-functional, they're collaborative, and they also leverage lean and agile. Now let's look at some examples. I'm going to show you 4. This first example, one of my transformations that I help lead, is a hub and spoke model, and this was one that spanned the globe. So we actually have offices in the US, offices in the UK, and also in Europe. And you can see here when you look at the enterprise lace in this hub and spoke model, I've got different types of leadership here. And we also have a C-level executive that's very closely integrated into this core lace team. Head of IT, head of architecture, head of change delivery, and of course we've got our coaches. We had a coach that focused on tools and an enterprise transformation coach. But the spokes of these were really geographically local laces within the country units. So we had one in the US, one in the UK, and also a Europe-based one. And of course, an executive lace. And you can see here, they're C-level people, and they were very engaged. The other key component was making sure that we had connection and tie back in our model so that we're getting feedback from boots on the ground. We do this through communities of practice and other forums, but we definitely had multiple going across the different country units. Now, this was a global financial services company. And what they were trying to do is they had started with some agile practices, but they wanted to unite the teams across the globe so that they could deliver greater value to the business and accelerate the pace of change. But they wanted to do this together under one model instead of having different ways of working. And what about our courageous leadership, right? That's what this talk is about. Executive participation and leadership. We had sponsorship from the top down. They were very engaged. They positioned the transformation as one of the top initiatives to invest in that year. So they had, we had full buy-in and support. They funded external coaching so that we could make sure we were building up their change agents. And they were very vocal in terms of communicating the why, communicating why are we transforming, why are we moving to SAFE, what is SAFE, what is this, what are we going to expect. So very transparent in terms of leadership and communications to make sure that we're bringing everyone with us. What kind of results did we see in this particular example? We got better predictability. You can see that, accelerating the pace of change, reducing defect rate, high employee engagement, which is always one of my most important litmus test items in a successful transformation is how do the people feel? They're the ones changing, so we need to measure that. We also resulted in having improved transparency so that we could make faster decision making, and then sharpen the ability to attract and retain talent. So that's an example of a hub and spoke and what that could look like. My next example is a centralized model. So in this one had people that are mostly based out of the US, but we did have some team members that were in Europe. My core LACE team here, you can see the kind of the level of the organization, right? With the LACE leader, we had a dedicated LACE scrum master, we had a director from IT involved, and also a portfolio operations person, because LPM was one of the top things we were trying to help with. And of course, coaching, enterprise transformation coach and ARC coaches. But notice too on the extended team, right? Remember, we want to do this together. So we've got different levels of leaders across different functional groups: business operations, business, HR, strategy, marketing, PMO, architecture, vendor management, IT operations, and data. And we had full buy-in from the executive, right? The executive LACE is the other thing you see here. This was all done and driven by and funded by the Chief Operating Officer's organization. And you see the other folks that we had as part of that executive LACE team. So remember that the executive LACE is like the business owner of the transformation, and we want to keep them engaged. And these guys were definitely fully engaged. So this is a huge healthcare provider that we ran this transformation, within, and we were helping them. And what they were trying to achieve was they did have some agile ways of working going already, but it was really siloed. They didn't really have kind of cohesion, so it was leading to lots of delays and inconsistencies. So what they were trying to do is increase time to market, or speed to market, improve quality, and really leverage their scaled agile capabilities and increase the use of that in a consistent manner so that they can get better business results. So what about these leaders? Were they courageous? Absolutely. These are fully engaged leaders, and they actually took business agility to heart. They did it, in such a way that they actually changed their HR job titles. Like my LACE leader, which was a director, became the director of business agility. And the leader that he reported to, which is an executive VP, she rebranded her VP title to VP of Business Agility. So they were all in. They believed in this, and the journey's still continuing today. Well, what kind of results did we see during the time that I was helping them? Well, of course, we started to organize around value through value stream and art identification, and then folks had to be trained in this new way of working. We launched the initial arts and started to standardize the tooling as well as ways of working. And this led to more effective and efficient flow. So you can see 90% predictability, high eNPS, which once again, employee NPS, employee happiness, employee engagement that is my favorite metric when it comes to transformation. And of course, we got more releases too, because we were more effective and efficient in terms of connecting strategy and execution. The journey still continues. We had multiple communities of practice that I helped put in place, and new art launches are still happening. But those leaders definitely were all in. They were very transparent, too, in terms of letting everyone know the why. And that's another, to me, critical success factor, is making sure that you're bringing your people with you. We had quarterly town halls that were focused on business agility, where folks kind of got the big picture view of what's happening and where we're going. And also, my LACE leader, helped run a lot of these events, as well as Lean Agile forums that were run using Lean Coffee, where people could come get their questions answered, about when they're going to be part of the transformation, how things are going, what to expect. So very, very good, heavily involved, and empathetic leaders that really cared about their people. My third example here is a decentralized model. So in this one, you can see here with the decentralized model, remember I said they can have their own implementations of SAFe, so they could be using a different configuration in each portfolio. And because these transformations may start at different times, they may form a LACE at a different time. So each portfolio would have its own LACE, but they pretty much had a similar pattern in terms of who is involved with the transformation in the portfolio and their LACE. So you can see here leaders from business, delivery, technology, and transformation coaching, an internal coach paired with an external transformation coach in each portfolio, so that we're building their champions with our expertise. And then from an executive perspective, across the enterprise, we had a really, really, she's a great example of a courageous leader. She was the transformation director, was very motivated and passionate about moving in this direction, and partnered with leaders from finance, operations, and technology. So this is a Fortune 100 insurance company, and their goals were to streamline and become more agile, right, so that they could get better business benefits. From a leadership perspective, we definitely had top-down buy-in and participation. This was an enterprise-wide SAFe transformation. It was fully funded. Like the other transformations, it was one of the top initiatives each year, right? It was in the top strategic initiatives and was fully funded and made very visible. Now, the transformation director here, she was absolutely an amazing leader. She had a lot of the characteristics you look for in a transformation leader, and she definitely cared about her people. Even though portfolio, these transformations were happening in different portfolios in the organization, she had a pulse on everything that was going on, down to, each coach that was there and what she liked about each coach and where the struggles were. She was constantly communicating to everyone, once again, the why. What are we getting? She was a great change champion. Again, like some of the other leaders I mentioned, high degree of empathy, but she could be firm when she needed to be, right, so that we could achieve our goals. So she was a really, really good example, and everyone had very high opinions of her in the organization. They thought she did a great job, and her passion was contagious. So what did we get here? Well, we started off decentralized, right, because we were going at different paces within each portfolio. Then we have, by having this focus and having support and coaching, we have consistent application of tooling and ways of working, and that led to more effective and efficient delivery. We had very high employee engagement. People were excited and united around this transformation leader. And eventually, we kind of had enterprise engagement, but we've kind of shifted more to a hub and spoke model over time because when we got most of the portfolios transformed, we wanted to make sure we had some consistency and a formal mechanism for the portfolios to learn from each other. So we created that kind of thin enterprise hub. And of course, just like the other transformations I mentioned, communities of practice are always very important to me. So we stood up many COPs, and that helped balance out kind of the top-down view versus the bottom-up, boots on the ground feedback, and we could relentlessly improve based on that feedback. Now in this fourth example, this one is another global transformation. Most of the people were in the US, and we did have some team members in India. So here, my core LACE team, you can see some of the levels of the organization and the functional areas that were taking part in this. I have my LACE leader, someone focused on portfolio practices, process and metrics, and tooling is part of that too, and of course our coaches. But we had cross-functional engagement with other parts of the organization, and you could see that in the extended team. Remember, the core LACE team is fully dedicated, fully funded. Extended team are part-time team members. So we had some leadership representation from, the folks that were focused on DevOps. We have quality represented, IT, delivery, architecture, infrastructure, business, and finance. And then, of course, the executive sponsors. So this was being sponsored and championed by the Chief Product Officer. And we also had a strong partnership with the CPO and the Chief Technology Officer. So they were guiding lights in this transformation. This is a global financial services company. And at the time that I was brought in, the morale, the turnover wasn't very good. This was their third attempt at transformation, and they learned from the past two attempts. But it resulted in the employees in the organization, lots of change fatigue. They're like, oh my God, not another transformation. The first two didn't work. How is this going to be different? So there was high turnover and change fatigue from those past attempts. The kind of corporate goals here were the overall organization had a desire to become more innovative, right? They competed against other companies. They wanted to be more adaptive and nimble so that they could seize these opportunities as they emerged in the industry. How did leadership help this go round? There's a lot of change fatigue, lots of skepticism. People would, didn't want to, in some cases, didn't even want to be part of this. So this Chief Product Officer, thinking about courageous leaders, she was new. She came from another organization where she had seen great agile ways of working and the benefits that came with it. So she knows what good looks like. And she brought that energy and that experience to the organization and started to champion, the fact that we should try it again. And because she was a Chief Product Officer, she wanted to make an investment in this. So we ended up overcoming the challenges of past transformations by investing, in all levels of the organization to provide coaching. So we had coaches, a transformation coach working with leadership. We had art coaches working with arts. And we had a strong partnership with the technology organization. So those were really critical, having her leadership. And also when I go back to my core LACE team, the LACE leader was really good. He was he cared about the people. He always wanted to get constant feedback. He was always talking to people, so we would launch an art, and then we would immediately do a quick retrospective with the art leadership team, the art triad, some of the leaders there, some of the employees we'd get feedback from too, the team members. so that we can learn rapidly what worked well and what didn't work well, because we were just launching arts constantly. We were going at a very fast pace, and we had a pretty good-sized team of coaches to do this. So what did we get? Eventually, we ended up transforming a good portion of the organization. So we started to unify under a common operating model, with SAFE at the helm there. And you could see increased productivity. So in other words, delivering more with less in that case, reducing time to market. So we're able to deliver more sooner. And once again, my favorite one, high employee engagement. There was decreased turnover. When I first came to this organization, they were actually going out into their city and telling people not to work there because, it's a shop, it's a sweatshop, right? You don't want to work here. But by the time we had gotten about 18 months into this transformation, we probably had about, 15 or 16 Agile release trains at that point in a year and a half. And they were actually people were going out into the city and talking with some of their friends that used to work there and saying, hey, you should come back here. They actually listen to us now. Look who comes to our PIs. The business is there, executives, they're engaged, and we can tell them what's going to fit and not fit. And they actually listen to us, and they're not trying to tell us to do more than we have capacity to do. So people actually were coming back and getting rehired. So turnover went down. At that point, I stayed with them for 2 years, but a year and a half into it, they ended up being voted the best place to work in that city. So it was a complete turnaround. The other key component here that you're probably starting to see some patterns emerge, my LACE leader constantly was seeking feedback. We looked for our change champions, those people that really believed in agile ways of working. We call them agile advocates, and got constant feedback from those folks, had many communities of practice going so that we have, once again, top-down and bottom-up engagement. And they positioned themselves really well to acquire another company by the time I left. So let's talk about some of those common themes. I've given you 4 examples. I've shown you my generic pattern of what I've used at different organizations. But you probably heard some similar things. The reason I always want to make sure we have executive engagement, and I'm talking C-suite, right? Engagement is because if we don't have enough executive leadership engagement, you may run into a blocker or an impediment, and you're not going to be able to resolve it, and your transformation will stall. So we do want to make sure, and I do train, I've taken my executive leaders, C-suite, through leading SAFE. It's important. We want to get them involved early. That's why I have that as a component of the LACE model. And the other theme you heard was successful transformations position the transformation as a top strategic initiative, right? This isn't like a side-of-the-desk thing where we're kind of begging and borrowing money from one cup to another cup to try to get people here. This is fully funded, and it's listed on the top priority list for the company, right? So we want to make sure that we get it fully funded, and that shows that we're serious about this. And it's an investment, not an expense, right? The other key piece, I mentioned executive engagement, but we don't want our transformation to be too top-heavy. That's great if you can get a lot of leadership support. But if it's too top-heavy and it's being pushed down and we're not communicating the why often, people are going to feel like the transformation's being done to them. And that's not going to help with morale either, right? They're the ones that are changing. They're the ones that are, yes, leaders are going to have to shift mindsets and different leadership styles to accommodate lean agile ways of working, but the real people that are changing are the people that are the boots on the ground. They're the ones that are building your solutions. They're being asked to work differently, and if they don't understand the mission and the vision, it's going to create a morale issue, right? And you're not going to get as much value. And of course, I showed you the implementation roadmap earlier. We want to make sure if people are being asked to shift to this new way of working, they need to understand how it works. Training. The other key thing, too, is you want to be able to measure your transformation results. And it's difficult to do that if your agile tooling is being used in an inconsistent way. So that, coupled with the training, are some of your key enablers, because people are going to want to know, transformation costs money. So what am I getting for the money that we're spending? We need to be able to measure that, right? So your tooling. And another thing I want to throw in there, because I've seen this happen a few times in some of my transformations, is I've given you some good examples. I've seen some good transformations. I've been a part of them. And I think, that's great that you can have a happy ending and have a happy ending to your story. But remember, this journey is going to continue on for a long time. It's never ending, right? We're going to have to care and feed the people that have shifted in this way. We have to mature them. But one of those common risk factors is making sure that you keep your eyes on executive leadership churn. This is another reason for that executive lace and the power that it can bring, because people come and go. Sometimes people retire. I mean, they're not going to be around forever. So if you see a leader come in, maybe they have the opposite impact that the leader that I mentioned, the chief product officer, had, right? She was like, I saw it work well. I want to bring it here. I'm going to fund it. But sometimes you have people that are like, I came from another company. It didn't work well. Why are we spending all this money on this one? And you're going to go back, when you think of the Tuckman model, right? Forming, storming, norming, performing. You're going to now have to go back in your Tuckman stage and probably go back to storming, maybe not forming. But by having that executive lace, you have that peer influence now, right? They know what's been going on, and they can help shift that thinking. So look for that too. It's not always puppy dogs and roses, right? Change is hard. Remember, transformation is a never-ending journey. Long-lived, that lace is going to be long-lived. It just may look different when we've shifted most of our groups to this new way of working, but we never will disband them. You saw earlier today, during the keynote, this new reimagined version of SAFE, right? And I love this graphic, by the way. I think it's great, it's easy to read. But guess what? One thing that wasn't taken off this kind of more simplified view is leadership is essential. They're at the foundation. Without lean agile leadership, SAFE won't work. And moreover, we don't want just leaders. We want courageous lean agile leaders who are passionate and they believe in this way of working. That also, same thing can be said about strategy, right? Portfolio leadership. If we do position transformation as one of our top strategic initiatives, we have to treat that like the other initiatives, be able to communicate the why, be able to measure the results that we're getting. And we want to make sure that we're involving that and progressing through in a similar fashion that we do the other strategic initiatives. All right, so in summary, transformation leadership is not a spectator sport. We don't want somebody to just sponsor this and say, go forth and do great things, right? We want their involvement. I want you on my executive lace. And we want their continuous participation as well as being trained. The other key thing is a healthy balance between the lace, centralized and decentralized decision-making, right? You heard me talk multiple times about, yay, I got executive engagement, that's awesome, and I've got some really courageous leaders leading the lace, awesome. But we care about our people. We always want to make sure that we have some decentralization and feedback, and that we're bringing people on the journey with us, and that we're constantly adapting based on that feedback. All right. I'm going to leave you with two final quotes before we see if anyone has any questions. This talk was about courageous leadership. So here's a quote from Churchill. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. You guys know change is hard. Pick yourself back up, just like that company did on that third attempt, and you'd be surprised at where you can land. And then success is not the result of spontaneous combustion. You must set yourself on fire. So, thank you so much for attending. I hope you took some nuggets away. I hope you go back and ignite your transformation and find some courageous leaders. But if we have a few minutes, I'll be happy to take any questions. If we don't have enough time to answer all of them, I'll be happy to talk with you outside. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Awesome. Great job, Charlene. That was very valuable. We actually talked about the importance of leadership in one of our roundtable discussions yesterday, so this would have been really great.
Awesome.
We have really good questions here. The first question is, how do you recommend to bridge the gap between leadership and change agents to form a lace?
How do you bridge the gap? I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure about bridging the gap as much as having them work together. I mean, in a lot of the patterns that I've seen where I've implemented a lace, we find the right people, we identify what our goals are, and you're always going to have change agents like coaches and folks like that. But for those change agents that are in a specific role, like RTEs, Scrum Master Team coaches, and those things, this is where the power of communities of practice come into play. Right? Because that's their primary job. They got to run the train, but this is that feedback loop I keep talking about. Is communities of practice are a good way to do that. I mentioned in my other example the Lean Agile forums that we would run to get feedback, and those are pretty much what I've done.
Wonderful. The second question we have here is, you mentioned a LACE should have depth. With members from other functional areas outside of coaches, can you provide some practical examples of team members from other functional areas and what their contribution to the LACE might look like?
Yeah, I've showed you some clear examples with it, with what their role was and what functional group that they were a part of, and also what level of the organization they were in. So I think they're pretty straightforward in terms of, we've got the leadership there. Some of them were, AVPs, some of them were directors, some of them were senior directors, maybe a senior manager. But the whole goal here is, when we think about the LACE, we might have started with a small group, but when we formalize a model like the one that I've shown you, I'm making the presumption that you've already been doing value stream and art identification, so you have those functional groups that you know are needed to deliver value, and I will, ask and have conversations with those leaders to identify, if you'd like to be part of that extended LACE, because they can't be full-time dedicated. They've already got to manage their functional group. They have to manage HR, they have to do that, but I want their engagement, and it's, in my examples I gave you before, having their engagement helps bring them along and also helps make sure that they feel like they're part of this transformation, right? They can also help roll out change much more quickly.
Yeah. Another question we have here is, a lot of the models and initiatives shown today start with the leadership being on board. What would you suggest to assist when leadership is being more hands-off? They believe in Agile but aren't the driving force or change advocates.
Yeah, so if you're not, remember how I said it's not a spectator sport, right? You can't just sign the check and walk away and then expect all this magic to happen. We want you there. Is it Deming? I think Deming was the one that, said, if you can't come, send no one. That's one of its vignettes. So I think I would start with, if I've got that situation, if I'm walking into an organization like that, I would make sure that they have some level of education on what business agility is, because a lot of times they probably have skipped the training. They were like, well, that's not for me. I'm going to send my people. I'm going to send the, the -1, and they're gonna go. I don't have time for that. So that's one of the first things I would do. I would like to get them in a leading safe, of course, but if they can't come to that, can they at least agree to come to an executive workshop, the SAFE executive workshop, right? Because that one, I've tweaked it a little bit, I've done different things with it, but to me, it really starts to engage that group with their peers. I ran the SAFE executive workshop one time with a CEO and all of her, direct reports in the C-suite, and they took the SAFE executive workshop together, and then they were, cross-checking each other. So putting them in an environment like that will open up some eyes. I could go on with that one for a while, but I hope you get the idea. Don't give up, but they probably just need to be educated. They don't know what they don't know because they never took the training.
Yeah, great answer. We also give some of that same advice in our implementing classes to try to get them into a leading safe or something where they can get a little bit more information to be on board. We have time for one more question, I think. Regarding transformation, how was employee engagement measured and at what frequency?
How was what measured?
Employee engagement.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so employee engagement can be measured different ways, right? I think on one of my slides I had employee NPS. In a lot of companies, I think people do that once a year, but from a transformation perspective, I like to collect feedback more frequently than that. You can use that measure, but I've used things like happiness scores, where you might be able to do that on a iteration by iteration basis every 2 weeks. Or every PI, would be a good cadence. But typically, for whatever your transformation metrics are, which are typically some combination of, employee engagement, number of releases or time to market and things like that, we want to be able to measure them on a shorter time frame so that we can show we're getting results.
Yeah. So that is all the time that we have for live questions. There's still a handful of great questions here if you don't mind answering them in the app, or also if you have some time to step outside and answer some questions. We appreciate having you, Charlene, and thank you so much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your summit.
Thanks, everyone.